morning, friends, colleagues. It's lovely to be with you this morning and to have the opportunity to take part in the gathering. This has been such a significant occasion as part of the annual calendar of events in Scotland, which is vital for us to engage in discussion about the role of the third sector in enhancing the life of people in Scotland, and for certainly me as First Minister to have the opportunity to acknowledge the strength and the significance of the work that you do and the essential role that you perform within our society. In short, what you do makes Scotland better today than it was yesterday. And I deeply appreciate that. I've seen that in my work as a constituency member of Parliament over the last 28 years. I've seen it as a minister in other capacities, and I have the privilege of seeing it as First Minister in a range of engagements that I take forward around the country. In my role as First Minister, I am unreservedly focused on the challenges that face our country and how we as a society can best address those challenges. Those challenges are complex, they are often long-standing, and they're often deeply rooted. And crucially, they're not something that one organisation can tackle alone. It takes all of us working together to create the type of lasting change and meaningful impact to transform lives that increasingly we see the need to do within our society. And that approach will not come about, that necessity to make a greater impact on the lives of individuals will not come about by just doing more of the same. We must take what works and build on it. We must be prepared to innovate and to improve. We must be prepared to find bright ideas and turn them into established practice. In short, we have got to be prepared as a country to reform, and my government is determined to do that. Let me focus on my overriding mission of the eradication of child poverty. It is an entrenched and deeply rooted problem facing society today. It drives entirely the policy agenda of my government, and I'm determined to use the power of government to make a lasting impact on that objective of eradicating child poverty. But eradicating child poverty requires action across all sectors. It's not a problem an issue that government alone can solve. It's one that needs to engage and embrace the work of all sectors within our society. And I extend to the third sector an invitation to engage and to work closely and collaboratively with you in supporting that policy objective that I know will be deeply held and focused on by many organisations within the third sector. And when I'm looking at what we need to do to eradicate child poverty, I recognise there are a range of different interventions we need to make. Some of them are decisions entirely at the hand of my government. We can take steps such as the introduction of the Scottish Child Payment, for example, which directly supports family incomes and boosts the livelihoods of families to address their circumstances. But there will be a range of other interventions that, yes, government can be part of and local authorities can be part of. But crucially, in my opinion, they will have more effect if we are aligning all of those interventions and support in an approach which is around supporting a whole family, to make sure that a whole family can experience and appreciate and value and have access to the support of a range of organisations to meet the circumstances that individual families face. So eradicating child poverty requires actions across all sectors to support the whole family in the right place at the right time, and ideally well before a crisis point is reached. Now, we began our Fairer Futures Partnership Programme to find better ways of delivering that whole family support. And in that approach, the third sector is a crucial partner, an absolutely essential partner in this work. Why? Because when crisis threatens for families, when the pressures of life become too complex, too difficult, too much to bear, it is not going to be me or my officials in the room, but very often you and the organisations that you represent who will be in the room supporting families. And we have to make sure that you have access to the resources and the capacity to make a difference for that family, to get alongside that family, and to make sure that as a result of the interventions that you make, principally in dialogue with families, you can have access to a range of different interventions and support that will make a meaningful difference to the lives of that family. You stand at the sharp end of service delivery, working with people facing the reality of poverty day in and day out. And that work has given you tremendous insight. You know what works well, you know what doesn't. Where unmet need is in our communities, you play an invaluable role as a critical friend to government, both local and national. And I need to create the pathways to make sure that your voices can be heard in that process. And also that the space is created to enable you to do that type of whole family support work that is necessary for individuals. I had a conversation the other week there with a young girl who told me in her first opening contribution that she was facing, there was a doubt that she was going to be able to sustain her position in school, that she was about to be thrown out of school. And when I inquired a bit about this, it was all about attendance and all about, and of course what lay behind it was a problem of addiction within her household. Now, a third sector organisation had started to support that family. And this young girl was able to recount to me how life in the household had become better because of the intervention of that third sector organisation. And that mum and dad were getting back to where they used to be and overcoming some of the issues that they faced because of the support, the whole family support offered by this third sector organisation. But she was facing the difficulty that her attendance record at school was an issue that was leading to the school raising questions about whether she was committed to stay in school. Now that is an example to me of what we've got to crack in our society, because that family was being supported to overcome its difficulties, but public authorities were not really adjusting and responding to the challenges that were presented by the experience of that girl as a consequence, not of anything that she was doing, but as a consequence of the family environment with which she was wrestling. So what we've got to make sure is that your experience in working with families around the country is enabled by the work that we can undertake in government to create that role, that position, that scope for the third sector to be influential. Because one thing of which I am certain is that if the third sector is close to those solutions for families, we will make a significant impact on the eradication of child poverty within our society. Now, so I have to create the space and the route and the voice, and SCVO, as your representative organisation, is phenomenally effective at making sure that we hear those points and those ideas that can influence our policy-making approach. And I assure you of the willingness of my government. You'll hear from Shirley-Ann Somerville, who leads our child poverty work, in the course of the gathering over the next couple of days. And you'll hear about some of the practical steps that we're taking to enable that to be the case. We had SCVO representation at a round table on child poverty in Butte House just last week. So be assured that I'm listening with care to the issues that are presented by the third sector, and I want to make sure you have a big role to play in the work of the government on the eradication of child poverty. Now, I know also that this sector is not without its challenges in relation to its financial security and its financial support, given the ongoing challenges that the whole of our society faces about the cost of living, about the cost of operation with the increased energy costs and increased costs on a whole variety of other different aspects of the running costs of organisations, and also the challenge has been presented very directly by the increase in employers' national insurance contributions, which I think is a terrible mistake, which is going to place a real burden on third sector organisations and businesses. And we will do all that we can within the funding decisions that we take to try to eradicate some of those challenges. But I'm also acutely aware of the need to deliver much more stable funding for the third sector so you can plan accordingly. Now, one of the things we're going to be doing today in Parliament this afternoon, stage one of the budget process is going to be reached, and as a consequence of good cross-party working, the budget has a confident route to pass in the course of the next 2 weeks. So the funding uncertainty about next year's budget has been removed significantly in advance of the end of the financial year. So what that is enabling more of my colleagues to undertake is to give much greater certainty to organisations about their funding for the next financial year. So whereas in the last financial year there was great uncertainty because of costs and many grant allocations could not be confirmed until well into the financial year, which is completely and utterly undesirable. We are now in a position that we have budget certainty, so we can pass that certainty on to a range of other organisations, and that is happening as we speak. But we've already also begun work to pilot multi-year funding to a number of organisations connected with the eradication of child poverty. As part of this, 45 organisations across Scotland will be given multi-year funding awards totalling £60 million each year in 25-26 and 26-27. It's a small first step, yes, but it signals a clear direction of travel to increasing the number of multi-year funding agreements more widely across the third sector. Now, Shona Robertson, the Finance Secretary, will provide more details on multi-year spending in the spring statement that she gives to Parliament, but our goal is to give you the certainty and the fiscal stability that you need to invest in your own organisations and, as a consequence, to invest in the communities of Scotland into the bargain. It will give you more space to plan for the future and to make the most of the resources available to you. It will give you the room for innovation and strategic thinking and the ability to look over a longer period of time at how your organisations can be strengthened to enable much more capacity to be deployed. So that approach to funding certainty is one that we want to build in as much as we possibly can do to a range of organisations and to spread that as widely as we can to give organisations the opportunity to plan and to avoid the unnecessary activity and the incredibly stressful and demanding activity of having to reconcile the needs of running the organisation with the strictures of 1 year funding, which can be really, really counterproductive. So I hope as we move through the course of the next few weeks and months, we are able to give that greater degree of certainty to you. But be assured, we are in a position that there is no reason why funding settlements for the next financial year cannot be confirmed quickly, because we have the confidence that the balanced budget is going to pass through Parliament. Why is that important? Well, that's important because I need you to be less worried about money and better able to do what you are really good at, which is focusing on the needs of individuals and communities in our society. Because if you take anything from what I'm saying this morning, please take the willing recognition of the capacity and the capability of the third sector to make a huge difference in the lives of individuals within our society, and in relation to my core policy objective of eradicating child poverty, for you to make the difference in supporting families to be able to overcome those challenges. And if we line up all of this activity, if we create a sense of policy unity across government, local government, the third sector, a variety of organisations in Scotland, all focusing on that policy direction, and believe you me, government is getting the strongest possible policy direction from me, that's what I want government to be focused on, then I'm confident collectively we can overcome many of the challenges that have faced children and families within our society and deliver the better outcomes that we all want to see. Because fundamentally, The eradication of child poverty is an investment in the future of our country, and the third sector has got a vital role to play in that. And I invite you to play that part alongside government, with the support of government, and as willing and effective partners. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, thank you, First Minister. That was great. You've stolen some of the questions that were coming up shortly, from me especially, so I'm very pleased to hear that. And you set out really clearly your priority on child poverty there. And I know you have other priorities around growing the economy, reforming public services and climate emergency, and the voluntary sector, obviously, as you know, plays a role across those other priorities too. As well as addressing the multi-year issue, which is a thorny issue for anyone that's in receipt of funding from government or local government as well. There's also the complexity that you alluded to in your speech, and Pradesh mentioned, in terms of just some of the processes. It's got to get more streamlined, surely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm let's take that away for I'd happily. There's a willingness in government to get all this, because I can't honestly see all these reports that you do. I can't honestly say that they're all poured over in intricate
There's
detail.
civil servants out there going, be quiet, with piles of reports in their bags.
I'm the one that says what the government's position is. I came to the rescue of the cat population of Scotland yesterday, so
I wasn't going to mention it.
Exactly. It's sentences you never thought you'd ever utter in life, but they've been uttered. So I think proportionate reporting.
Yeah.
And a proportionate bureaucracy, because actually, there are obviously, there's value for money challenges that government comes under. We've got a public audit committee, we've got auditors, we've got to be confident about these things. But there's being confident and there's being OTT.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And there's a happy balance in between.
Yeah.
So there's the guidance just been issued.
There is work going on within government, but yeah.
But it's an open door to try to address that.
Thank you, really appreciate that. So, as you can imagine, we had lots of questions on the rise in national insurance contributions, which you did also mention there, and I will be raising that with the Under Secretary of State for Scotland tomorrow. But we've got, our next question kind of touches on that too. So Tracy, we have Tracy Kirkland here from the Government Community Project. Tracy.
Sure. Good morning, First Minister. We've touched a lot on the rise in costs caused by the national insurance contribution hike that's forthcoming, and the impact that's going to have on organisations, and the direct impact that then has on service delivery at the front line as well. But some of those rising costs also come from organisations' commitments to Scottish Government's own fair work principles and paying people a fair wage. Are the Scottish Government going to take that into consideration when they're looking at funding partnerships? Many organisations are meeting these costs on the same level of funding that they had over 5 years ago. So will that be taken into consideration? And how can the Scottish Government use its influence to inform and influence other large funders to take that into consideration as well?
Well, I think on employers' national insurance contributions, look, I am very concerned about the impact this is going to have on, actually on all sectors of the economy, the private, public and third sectors. It's just going to, I've been around long enough to know that employers' national insurance contributions used to be called a tax on jobs. And, it's kind of, the clue's in the name, and I just worry about, if I was looking at a letter from a third sector organisation who were putting to me the increase in their costs and just what that means in terms of people, and it's very unsettling. I was very grateful to SCVO for its participation with COSLA and the government in making representations to the Chancellor about this point, because I suggested to the UK government a more straightforward way to do this is to increase income tax in the way that we have done in Scotland, because it would have raised about the same amount of money and it wouldn't have created the heartache and difficulty this is going to create. I think what we've got to do is to try to take account of that as much as we possibly can do in funding settlements, Tracy. I can't give you a comprehensive assurance about that, but we will do our best to try to reflect that in the settlements that we put forward. We are trying in the allocation of resources, and we're still working our way through what will be the financial, what will be the compensatory payments we will receive in Scotland from the employers' national insurance contribution increases from the UK government, but we will do our level best to try to reflect that in the settlements that we bring forward. And in terms of funders, again, we will, we're clearly making that point, the importance of funders reflecting that as well. And I think certainly from, my engagement with funders around the country, I think there's an acknowledgement that that is a very real factor that people are wrestling with.
I think particularly for organisations like yours, Tracy, council funding would be a thing, wouldn't it, that you would be looking to different things from local authorities.
Local authorities, Scottish Government and other grants.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you for plugging our fair funding work earlier on.
Yes,
I know that,
very much appreciated.
The Cabinet Secretary for Social Justice is like a terrier on this subject, but my plea to you would be to kind of get that embedded right across Cabinet, so it's really uppermost in the minds of lots of other departments as well as Ms Somerville's.
I think the one thing I should, what I hope is coming across is that I hope government is feeling more cohesive, because all of these kind of cross-portfolio priorities, like the efforts on child poverty, is a cross-portfolio issue. It's not something that's just in Shirley-Ann Somerville's compartment. It's across education, it's across health, it's across transport, it's across economy. So there's a real, colleagues are being challenged to make sure that policies are in alignment, and we're doing that on a sustained basis. But I hope you're feeling the impact of that.
Thank you. So we're coming to our final question, and you can imagine that the sector being as it is, we had lots of questions about volunteering. Where the latest household survey shows that volunteering has gone down by 200,000, which is quite a stark figure. Volunteers run our sector and make up a large part of the workforce, for want of a better word. So Sarah, Sarah from Volunteer Scotland, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. Good morning, First Minister. As Anna's alluded to, volunteering in Scotland is in crisis. Volunteers and the organisations that engage them are struggling, which has led to a significant decline in adult formal volunteering from 26% in 2019 to 18% in 2023. Given the government's commitment to volunteering through the Volunteering Action Plan, and given the vital role of volunteers in supporting key government priorities, including eradicating child poverty and tackling the climate emergency, what additional actions or resources can the government commit to reverse this worrying trend?
Well, those numbers, that's the first time I've heard those numbers, Sarah, so that I can see why the alarm is, and it's quite clearly a post-COVID thing. So we need to intensify our activity about that, and clearly existing efforts are not being successful in generating and motivating enough volunteer activity. It's an interesting reflection that that's happened post-COVID. So obviously a lot of things are different post-COVID, and people's engagement is obviously different. So let me take that away, and we simply, we need to do something about that and to get that to a stronger position. I can't give you an instant solution today, but I will take that away and work with Shirley-Ann Somerville on how we can best tackle that. When I arrived here today, I was met by representatives of Girl Guiding Scotland, who gave me this lovely little badge, which is says "Powered by Volunteers, Girl Guiding Scotland." So just one of the many fantastic organisations that do wonderful work in our society, but we clearly need to encourage more of that. So let me take that away, and that's an issue of collaboration between SCVO and various interested parties, because if I think about my experience, any member of parliament is shaped by their experience in their community. And on Sunday, I was at the opening of a new football pavilion for a community football club in Blairgowrie, and to say that the hovel has been transformed into luxury accommodation is not an understatement of what has happened, but it's years and years of tenacious activity by volunteers. But that facility, okay, it is a set of changing rooms, but it's not just a set, it's changing rooms for a football club, but it's also a meeting space right in the heart of a community that faces acute deprivation. And after years and years and years of the public sector being unable to create sustainable facilities at the heart of that deprived community, volunteers have done it. And they've accomplished it. They got funding from Perth and Kinross Council, they got funding from the Ganachie Trust, and they got funding from Sports Scotland and the Scottish Football Association. But it's volunteers, it's absolutely volunteers that are running that. But what their vision is not just to provide changing facilities for football games, which they of course will provide, but they're wanting to provide a whole series of community-engaged activities using a venue right in the heart of a community, which has never existed before. So there's, that's a really good thing that's happened that wouldn't have happened without the driving purpose of volunteers. So so please be assured that I cherish that, but I also recognise those numbers are deeply disturbing, and we need to do something to help out in that respect.
First Minister, I'm very acutely aware of the fact your timings are very strict because you've got to get to Cabinet and it's budget day. So I really appreciate the fact that you've joined us and been so frank and so open with us. Join me in thanking the First Minister.